Look down at what you are wearing right now. A shirt, maybe a jacket, shoes laced tight against your feet. You put them on this morning without a second thought, the same way you have done every single day of your life. Dressing is so automatic that most people cannot even remember doing it. But here is what nobody ever told you about that shirt on your back. The reason your ancestors first covered their bodies has almost nothing to do with temperature. It has almost nothing to do with modesty. The real origin of clothing is far older, far stranger, and far more disturbing than anything you learned in school. And the moment you understand it, you will never look at what you are wearing the same way again. For most of human history, your ancestors walked this earth completely bare. Not because they had not invented tools, not because they lacked intelligence. They were making stone blades, building shelters, burying their dead with ritual and intention. They were, in almost every meaningful sense, fully human. And still, for hundreds of thousands of years, they wore nothing at all. So what changed? What was the moment, the specific, terrifying pressure, that finally forced your ancestors to cover their skin? Here is a small piece of the answer that researchers confirmed only in the last 2 decades. The lice living on your body right now are not the same species as the lice that live in your hair. They are close relatives, but biologically distinct. Head lice have lived on humans for millions of years. Body lice, the kind that require clothing to survive, branched off from head lice at a specific moment in prehistory. And when scientists at the University of Florida and the Max Planck Institute mapped the genetic split between the two species, they found it happened between 83,000 and 170,000 years ago. That is the closest thing we have to a biological timestamp for when your ancestors first began wearing something regularly enough for a new species of parasite to evolve to live in it. Clothing is so ancient, it left its fingerprints on the creatures that feed on us. But parasites are only the beginning of the story. To understand why your ancestors truly started covering their bodies, you have to go back much further. Back to a catastrophe so complete, it nearly ended the human story altogether. Around 75,000 years ago, a supervolcanic eruption at what is now Lake Toba in Sumatra produced the largest volcanic event in the last 2 million years. The eruption ejected an estimated 2,800 cubic kilometers of material into the atmosphere. Ash spread across South Asia, blanketing thousands of miles of land. Global temperatures dropped. Vegetation collapsed. Archaeological and genetic evidence suggests that the human population may have crashed to as few as 10,000 breeding individuals. Some estimates go lower. Humanity was nearly erased. Researcher Stanley Ambrose at the University of Illinois proposed that this population bottleneck, this near-extinction, created the pressure that accelerated behavioral and technological change in the survivors. The humans who made it through were the ones who had figured something out. And what the Toba survivors seemed to have done, as climates turned brutal and food sources disappeared, was innovate. They pushed into colder territories. They refined their tools. And they wrapped themselves in the skins of the animals they had learned to hunt. Not for fashion, not even primarily for warmth in the beginning, for survival at the edge of extinction. The oldest direct evidence of clothing tools we have found are bone needles, thin, sharp, precisely made, discovered at sites across Eurasia and dating back roughly 45,000 to 60,000 years. But those needles tell us something more important than their age. They tell us about the complexity of thought that clothing required. Think about what making a fitted garment actually demands. You have to kill an animal and skin it cleanly without destroying the hide. You have to scrape the hide, treat it, soften it so it does not rot or crack. You have to cut pieces to a shape you are imagining before you have even made them. You have to punch holes at precise intervals. You have to thread sinew or plant fiber through those holes and sew the pieces together in the correct order to produce a shape that conforms to a human body. Every step requires abstract planning, the ability to hold a future object in your mind and work backward to create it. Clothing was not just technology, it was cognition made physical. Researcher Olga Soffer at the University of Illinois spent years analyzing impressions of woven plant fibers pressed into ancient clay figurines found at sites in the Czech Republic dating to roughly 26,000 years ago. What she found rewrote the understanding of prehistoric textile technology. These were not crude animal skins thrown over a shoulder. These were woven textiles, structured, deliberate, technically demanding fabric produced by people living through an ice age. The cognitive and social infrastructure required to produce them was enormous. Someone had to grow or gather the plants. Someone had to process the fibers. Someone had to know the weaving technique and teach it. Clothing, even at 26,000 years ago, was already a community technology. That is the part that is almost never talked about. Clothing did not just protect bodies, it reorganized social groups. When you require cured hides, you need hunters. When you require processed fibers, you need gatherers and processors. When you require needles, you need toolmakers. When you require knowledge passed across generations, you need teachers. The moment clothing became essential for survival in cold climates, it created interdependence, a web of specialized labor that no single individual could replicate alone. Anthropologist Ian Gilligan at the University of Sydney has argued that thermal clothing, fitted, insulating garments, was not just a response to cold, it was an enabling technology. It was what allowed your ancestors to expand into territories that would otherwise have killed them. Siberia, Northern Europe, eventually, via the land bridge, the Americas. The clothes on your body are the reason your ancestors could go everywhere. But there is a darker layer underneath that, and it involves something that still lives in you today. Around the same time that clothing technology was becoming sophisticated, 40,000 to 50,000 years ago, something else was happening in human groups that archaeologists call the Upper Paleolithic Revolution. Cave paintings appeared, jewelry appeared, figurines appeared, musical instruments appeared, and scholars have long debated why symbolic behavior exploded at this particular moment in prehistory. One answer that has gained serious traction connects directly to clothing. When you cover your body, you change what other people see of you. You create the possibility of concealment. You create the possibility of display. A garment can signal rank, group membership, readiness for battle, spiritual status, fertility, danger. Every time an ancient human wrapped an animal skin around themselves in a way that communicated something beyond warmth, they were doing something no other species had ever done. They were using material culture to construct an identity. Researcher Francesco Derrico at the University of Bordeaux has documented the oldest known personal ornaments, shell beads deliberately pierced and strung, at sites in North Africa and the Middle East, dating to roughly 130,000 years ago. These beads predate the lice timestamp for clothing, which means the impulse to decorate the body, to signal something about who you are, may be even older than the impulse to cover it for warmth. Your ancestors were not just solving a thermal problem, they were solving an identity problem. They were asking, with every hide they tanned and every fiber they wove, who am I in relation to you? That question has never stopped being asked. You asked it this morning, standing in front of whatever you have hanging in your wardrobe, choosing what to put on before walking out the door. The calculation you ran, what does this say about me? What will they think? Does this fit who I am today? Is the same calculation your ancestors were running in the cave, choosing which skin to wear before walking into the firelight where the rest of the group could see them. The technology has changed beyond all recognition. The cognitive act is identical. And here is what makes that genuinely unsettling, once you sit with it. Every system your civilization has built around clothing, the fashion industry, the dress code, the uniform, the brand, the status signal, the tribal marker, is not a modern invention layered on top of a practical tool. It is the original function. Clothing was a social technology before it was a thermal one. The warmth came later. The identity came first. You did not dress for the weather this morning. You dressed for the group. And your ancestors, skin scraped and sinew threaded, were doing exactly the same thing 100,000 years before you were born.